The silk robe felt cold against Destiny Williams's skin. She sat on the edge of the king-sized bed in the presidential suite of the Magnolia Hotel in downtown Houston, her bare feet pressed against the polished marble floor. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the Houston skyline glittered like a field of diamonds. Traffic hummed softly on Main Street 20 floors below. The city was alive, celebrating, moving forward. But inside the suite, time had stopped. Destiny's hands trembled as she stared at the manila envelope resting on her lap. It had been tucked inside Marcus's leather briefcase. She hadn't been looking for it. She had only been searching for a phone charger. But when her fingers brushed against the thick paper, something in her chest tightened. A warning, a whisper, the kind of feeling that had kept her alive through 8 years of double shifts, empty refrigerators, and sleepless nights. She opened it. Inside was a single photograph and a legal document. The photograph was faded, the edges curled with age. It showed a man in a dark suit shaking hands with another man beside a black sedan. A silver briefcase sat open between them, stuffed with cash. Destiny's breath caught in her throat. She knew that face. She knew the sharp jawline, the thick eyebrows, the way his shoulders sat slightly uneven. It was her father, Harold Williams, the man who had walked out of her life when she was 9 years old. The man she had spent 15 years believing had abandoned her and her mother. The man she had buried in her heart long before the fire took everything else. But he wasn't alone in the photo. The man shaking his hand wore a tailored navy suit, a gold watch, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Destiny didn't recognize him, but the license plate on the sedan behind them was clear enough to read, and the embossed logo on the briefcase made her blood run cold. Coleman Holdings. Her fingers moved to the legal document. It was a settlement agreement, dated 15 years ago, signed in black ink. The language was dense, but the numbers jumped off the page like gunshots. $2 million, embezzled from Coleman Holdings corporate accounts, transferred to offshore holdings under the name Harold Williams. Settlement reached, non-disclosure enforced, all records sealed, Destiny's vision blurred. Her chest tightened. She couldn't breathe. Coleman Holdings. That was Marcus's father's company. The company that had collapsed overnight. The company that had driven Marcus Coleman SR to take his own life 6 months later. The tragedy that had broken Marcus Coleman Jr. into the quiet, guarded, intensely private man she had just married 3 hours ago. Her father hadn't abandoned them. He had stolen. He had lied. He had destroyed a family. And he had left Destiny and her mother to pay the price. A soft sound escaped her lips. Not a cry. Not a scream. Just the sound of a heart cracking open. She flipped the photograph over. On the back, in her father's familiar slanted handwriting, were 7 words that turned her entire world to ash. The fire wasn't an accident. They needed the property. Coleman had to go. The fire. The fire that had burned their Caldwell County home to the ground. The fire that had taken her mother's life. The fire that had left 16-year-old Destiny standing in the rain in her pajamas, holding her 12-year-old sister Grace, watching everything she loved turn to smoke. It wasn't faulty wiring. It wasn't bad luck. It was murder. And her father had known. Destiny's hands shook so violently the photograph slipped from her fingers and drifted to the marble floor. She pressed both hands over her mouth to keep from screaming. Tears burned her eyes, hot and fast, spilling over her cheeks and dripping onto the white silk of her robe. Behind her, in the darkened bedroom, Marcus Coleman Jr. slept, her husband, the man who had held her hands at the altar 3 hours ago and whispered, "I promise to never hide from you again." The man who had built a billion-dollar empire from the ashes of his father's ruin. The man who had no idea he had just married the daughter of the man who destroyed his family. Destiny looked at the legal document again. At the bottom, a single line had been typed in bold. "Sign within 24 hours. Walk away with $5 million. Stay and face the consequences of the truth." Someone knew. Someone had left this for her, and whoever it was didn't want her married to Marcus Coleman Jr. If your heart is racing right now, take a second and hit that like button. Drop a comment saying, "Destiny deserves the truth, because what happens next will change everything." And if you're new here, subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss a single moment of this story. But how did a struggling waitress from a tiny Montrose apartment end up married to a Houston billionaire whose family her own father ruined? How did 2 broken people from completely different worlds collide in a way that would either save them or destroy them both? Let me take you back. Back to where this story really began. Back to a rainy Tuesday night in Midtown Houston, a dimly lit bar called the Copper Lantern, and a man who walked in looking like he had already lost everything. The rain had been falling since noon. Not the gentle kind that makes you roll down your car windows and breathe deep. The heavy kind. The kind that flooded the streets near Emancipation Park, turned potholes into small lakes, and made every driver in Houston forget how to use their turn signals. Inside the Copper Lantern, the air was warm and thick with the smell of bourbon, fried catfish, and old wood. The kind of place where people came to forget their problems for an hour before going back to face them. Behind the counter stood Destiny Williams, wiping down glasses like she had done 1,000 times before. 24 years old, beautiful in a way that didn't need any help. Deep espresso brown skin that glowed under the amber bar lights. High cheekbones. Dark eyes that carried more stories than most people accumulated in a lifetime. She wore her natural black hair pulled back in a tight, practical bun. A faded blue work shirt. A black apron tied snug around her waist. Sneakers that had seen better years. Nobody knew that beneath that apron, she carried 2 jobs worth of exhaustion in her bones. Nobody knew that her feet had been aching since 5 in the morning because she had pulled a double shift at a diner in Montrose before coming here. And nobody knew that every single dollar she earned went into a shoebox on her kitchen counter labeled Grace in thick black marker. Grace was her younger sister, 22, the smartest person Destiny had ever known. 2 years away from becoming the first person in their family to earn a college degree. Destiny had made sure of that. She had dropped out of Houston's Central High School at 16, 2 months after the fire. The fire that took their mother. The fire that took their home. The fire that took everything. One night, her mother had kissed them both on the forehead and told them to sleep tight. By morning, all Destiny could remember was smoke, screaming, and Grace's small hand gripping hers as they stumbled out into the cold night air in their pajamas. Their mother didn't make it out. Their father was already gone. The fire department said it was faulty wiring. The insurance company said it was underinsured. And 2 orphan black girls from Caldwell County, Texas, were left standing on a sidewalk with nothing but each other. Pastor Harold Thompson, the elderly leader of Grace Covenant Church in Houston's 3rd Ward, took them in. He fed them, clothed them, and made sure they stayed in school. But the church was small. His pension was smaller, and Destiny could see the worry lines deepening on his face every year. So at 16, Destiny made a choice that would define the rest of her life. She stopped being a child. She got her first job at a laundromat near Alabama Street, then a second at a gas station on San Jacinto, then a third cleaning offices at night in downtown Houston. By 18, she was working so much she could barely keep her eyes open during the day. But Grace stayed in school. Grace kept her grades up. Grace made Destiny's sacrifice worth something. Now, at 24, Destiny worked at a diner in the mornings and the Copper Lantern in the evenings. She barely slept. She barely ate. She barely had time to think about anything that wasn't Grace's tuition, Grace's books, Grace's future. She never complained, not once. Because what was complaining going to do? Bring her mother back, pay her bills, put food on the table? No, so she smiled. She worked. And she kept moving forward. "Another round for table 6D, called Marcus Thompson, the old bartender who had taken a chance on a girl with no high school diploma but eyes full of determination. "On it," Destiny replied, her voice bright despite the exhaustion that lived in her bones. She moved through the bar like she had been born there, dodging chairs, weaving between customers, setting down drinks with a smile that made people feel like she actually cared. Because she did. Every single person who walked through that door carried something heavy. She could see it. Maybe because she carried something heavy too. The door opened, letting in a gust of cold rain and the smell of wet asphalt. And then he walked in. He was tall. That was the first thing Destiny noticed. Tall and broad-shouldered, with deep coffee-brown skin and eyes that looked like they hadn't slept in a month. He wore a charcoal overcoat that probably cost more than Destiny made in a year, but it hung on him like it didn't matter. His short, faded haircut was damp from the rain. His jaw was tight. His whole body carried the weight of a man who had everything the world could offer and none of what he actually needed. He didn't look around the bar like someone checking out the scenery. He looked at it like a man searching for a place to disappear. He sat in the corner booth, alone, back against the wall, the way people sit when they don't want anyone behind them. Destiny had seen that posture before. She had worn it herself. She walked over with a menu. "Evening," Destiny said. "What can I get you?" The man looked up and something flickered behind his eyes. Surprise, maybe. Like he hadn't expected anyone to actually look at him and see him. "Whiskey," Marcus Coleman Jr. said. His voice was low, rough, like gravel over velvet. "Neat, whatever your strongest is." Destiny studied him for a moment, not with curiosity about his obvious money, but with something deeper, something that looked almost like recognition. "Rough night?" Destiny asked. "Rough year," Marcus replied, and then, almost against his will, he added, "Actually, rough decade." Destiny didn't push, she didn't pry. She just nodded, set down his drink, and placed a glass of water next to it. "That one's on me," Destiny said, nodding to the water. "Trust me, you're going to need it." Marcus looked at the water, then at her. "Why?" "Because whatever you're running from tonight," Destiny said, her voice soft but certain, "it's not going anywhere, and neither is this whiskey, but dehydration will hit you harder than heartbreak in the morning." Something shifted in his face. A crack in the armor, barely visible, but it was there. "Thanks," Marcus said quietly. "Don't mention it," Destiny replied. "That's literally my job." She walked away, and she didn't look back. She had no idea that the man in the corner booth was Marcus Coleman Jr., the 32-year-old billionaire CEO of Coleman Technologies, one of the fastest-growing tech companies in Texas. She had no idea he owned buildings downtown, employed thousands of people, and had a net worth that could buy every bar on West Gray Street 10 times over. She had no idea that 3 weeks ago, the woman he thought he would marry had looked him dead in the eyes and told him she never loved him. That every kiss, every whispered promise, every shared dream had been a performance. His name was Marcus Coleman Jr., but to Destiny, he was just another customer nursing a drink on a rainy Tuesday night. And that was exactly why she was the only person who could save him. He came back the next night, and the night after that, and the night after that. For 2 straight weeks, Marcus Coleman Jr. walked through the door of the Copper Lantern at exactly 7:30, sat in the same corner booth, ordered the same whiskey, and waited. Not for anything specific. For her. For the sound of her voice saying, "Evening, what can I get you?" For the way she treated every customer like they were the only person in the room. For the way she laughed at old Marcus Thompson's terrible jokes even though they weren't funny. For the way she once kicked out a grown man twice her size for making a young woman at table 7 uncomfortable, and didn't even break a sweat doing it. "You kicked that man out because he was being rude?" Marcus asked her one night, genuinely stunned. Destiny shrugged, polishing a glass. "He was harassing someone. That's not rudeness, that's a choice, and choices have consequences." "You're not afraid of anyone, are you?" Marcus said. Destiny paused, looked at him, and for the first time let him see something behind her smile, something old, something that burned. "I've been afraid every single day since I was 16, Destiny said quietly. "Afraid of losing my sister, afraid of not having enough, afraid that one bad night could take everything away again. So no, Mr. Coleman, I'm not afraid of anyone, I'm afraid of everything, and I get up anyway." Marcus felt the air leave his lungs. No woman in his world had ever said anything that real to him. Not Victoria, not the executives, not the socialites. Nobody. Here was a woman who had lost her mother, dropped out of school, worked her fingers raw, and still stood in front of him with more dignity than anyone he had ever met. And she didn't even know who he was. Not really. That was the thing that terrified him most. Because the moment she found out, the moment she learned about his money, his name, his empire, she would either run toward it or run away from him. Either way, she would stop seeing him, and he wasn't sure he could survive being invisible again. Marcus Coleman Jr. was not a trusting man. He hadn't always been this way. There was a time when he believed in people, when he thought love was real and loyalty was guaranteed. That time ended on a Thursday evening in his penthouse overlooking Buffalo Bayou, when Victoria Cole told him in a voice as smooth as silk, "I'm leaving, Marcus. I'm not in love with you. I never was." She had been with him since college, 6 years, and it was all an act. She left with Damian Blackwell, a man Marcus had once called a friend, a man who was slightly richer and slightly crueler. After that, Marcus built walls so thick and so high that no one could climb over them. He controlled everything, trusted nothing, believed every person had an angle, every relationship was a transaction, and love was just a word people used to get what they wanted. So when he felt himself falling for Destiny, a waitress with calloused hands and a heart too big for her own good, he did what he always did. He tested her. It started small. One night, he accidentally left a $200 tip on a $30 tab. He watched from the doorway as Destiny counted the cash, then shoved it into an envelope and handed it to old Marcus Thompson behind the bar. "That man left too much money," Destiny said. "Put it aside. I'm giving it back tomorrow." Marcus Thompson raised an eyebrow. $200 is $200. The man can afford it." Destiny shook her head firmly. "Marcus, if I take money that wasn't meant to be taken, what does that make me? It makes me no better than the people who took everything from us and slept fine at night." Marcus Thompson studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly and took the envelope. "You're something else, kid," Marcus Thompson said. "Something else." Marcus Coleman Jr. S-test continued. He brought up expensive topics casually: cars, vacations, designer brands, watching for any flicker of greed in her eyes. There was none. When he mentioned his car, she yawned and said, "That's nice. Can you move it? You're blocking my parking spot." He nearly laughed out loud. But the biggest test came on a Friday night. Marcus walked in carrying an envelope. Inside was $5,000 in cash. He placed it on the counter in front of Destiny and slid it toward her. "For your sister's tuition," Marcus said. "I know you could use it." Destiny looked at the envelope. She didn't touch it. Her hands rested on the counter, steady as stone. "How do you know about my sister's tuition?" Destiny asked, her voice calm but sharp as a blade. "People talk," Marcus said vaguely. "Marcus Thompson talks too much," Destiny muttered. Then she looked at Marcus Coleman Jr., and her eyes were like fire. "I appreciate the thought, I really do, but I can't take this." "Destiny." "No," Destiny interrupted. "I work for what I have, every dollar, every cent. If I take money I didn't earn, I dishonor every early morning I've ever woken up for. I dishonor my mama who taught me that honest work is holy work, and I dishonor myself." She pushed the envelope back toward him. "But thank you," Destiny added, softer now. "That means more than you know." Marcus stared at the envelope. Then at her, then at the envelope again. No one had ever refused his money, not once in his life. People had killed for less. And here was this woman, this beautiful, tired, magnificent woman, pushing $5,000 away like it was nothing. Because to her, it wasn't about the money. It was about who she was. And Marcus Coleman Jr. felt the last wall around his heart crack down the middle. 2 weeks later, Grace Williams burst through the door of the Copper Lantern like a hurricane in sneakers. D. Destiny looked up from behind the bar. "Grace, you know you can't just..." But Grace was already running, tears streaming down her face, holding a letter in her hands like it was made of gold. "I got it, D. I got it, the scholarship. Full ride for my master's program at Rice University. Full ride, everything covered." Destiny dropped the glass she was holding. It shattered on the floor. She didn't care. She rounded the counter, grabbed her sister by the arms, and pulled her into the tightest hug in the history of hugs. Both of them were crying. Both of them were laughing. Both of them were holding on like the world might end if they let go. "Your mama is looking down right now," Marcus Thompson said from behind the bar, his own eyes suspiciously wet. "And she is smiling." Destiny squeezed Grace tighter. "We did it, baby girl. We actually did it." Grace pulled back, wiping her eyes. "No, you did it, Dee. You gave up everything for me, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every missed chance you could have had for yourself. You did all of that for me." "Stop that," Destiny said, her voice cracking. "You earned that scholarship with your brain, your grades, and your heart. I just made sure you had a warm place to study." "You did more than that," Grace said firmly. "You gave me a reason to keep going." Marcus watched from his corner booth. He saw the way Destiny held her sister. The way her entire body relaxed for the first time since he had known her. The way she laughed, not the professional laugh she gave customers, but the real one, the raw one. The one that sounded like sunshine after a thunderstorm. He saw a love so deep and so fierce that it made his chest ache. Because he had never seen love like this before. Not in his life. Not in his world. This was love without conditions, without calculations, without expecting anything in return. And it was the most beautiful thing he had ever witnessed. If you're feeling this story so far, do me a favor. Smash that like button and drop a comment saying, "Destiny is a queen." Trust me, she's going to need all the support she can get for what's coming next. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss what happens when the past comes knocking on this couple's door. That night after Grace went home and the bar cleared out, Marcus sat alone in the corner. Destiny wiped down the counter, humming a song her mother used to sing. "Destiny," Marcus said. She looked up. "Yeah. My name isn't just Marcus," he began. "It's Marcus Coleman Jr. I run Coleman Technologies. I have more money than I know what to do with, and I haven't been happy in. I don't even know how long." Destiny set down her cloth. "Okay." I came to this bar because I was drowning, Marcus continued. And I stayed because of you. Not your smile, not your beauty, though God knows both are extraordinary. I stayed because you showed me that real people still exist. People who don't want things, people who just give. Destiny was quiet for a moment. Then she leaned against the counter, crossed her arms, and looked at him with those deep brown eyes that could see straight through to a person's bones. Marcus Coleman, Jr., Destiny said slowly. Are you telling me you're a billionaire? He nodded. And you've been coming to this little bar in Midtown for 6 weeks? He nodded again. And this whole time I thought you were just a sad man with a whiskey problem. Marcus almost choked on his drink. A laugh escaped him, a real one, the first genuine laugh he'd had in months. I need to know something, Destiny said, her expression turning serious. Is this a setup? Are you testing me? Because if you are, I'll throw this dish rag at your face and I will not miss. Marcus raised both hands in surrender. No setup, no test, I swear. Good, Destiny said. Because I don't do games. I've been playing the game of survival my whole life and I'm tired of it. She picked up her cloth again and started wiping the counter, but Marcus could see the smile fighting to break through. 6 months. That's all it took. 6 months of slow, patient, terrifying love. 6 months of Marcus learning to trust without testing. 6 months of Destiny learning to receive without feeling weak. 6 months of Marcus Thompson grumbling about billionaires in my bar, and Pastor Harold crying every time Destiny brought Marcus to dinner, and Grace interrogating him like a federal witness until she finally decided, you're okay. But if you break her heart, I will end you, and I haven't even finished my degree yet. He proposed on a Tuesday. No cameras, no crowds, no spectacle, just the two of them at the copper lantern after closing, rain tapping against the windows the same way it had the night they met. Destiny Williams, Marcus said, dropping to one knee. I was broken when I walked into this bar. You didn't fix me. You just loved me enough to let me fix myself. Will you marry me? Destiny looked down at him, this man who had everything and wanted nothing but her, and felt tears she'd been holding back for 8 years finally fall. Yes, Destiny whispered. 1,000 times yes. They married 2 months later in a small church in Houston's 3rd Ward. Marcus Thompson walked her down the aisle in a navy suit that didn't quite fit. Pastor Harold wore a robe so wide it blocked the view for 3 rows behind him. Grace held the rings with trembling hands and didn't cry once until the vows. And then the vows began, and even the church walls seemed to lean in and listen. Marcus took Destiny's hands. I promise to never test you, never doubt you, and never forget that you are the bravest person I have ever known. You are my home, Destiny. Not a house, not a building. A home, the kind I never thought I'd find again. Destiny squeezed his hands. I promise to keep smiling, even when the world tries to make me stop. I promise to keep fighting, even when I'm tired. And I promise to never stop being the woman who brought you water with your whiskey. The congregation laughed. Grace wiped her eyes. Marcus Thompson blew his nose into a handkerchief loud enough to be heard in the parking lot. It was perfect. It was real. And then Victoria Coles showed up. Nobody had invited her. Nobody had wanted her there. But there she was, standing in the back of the church in a black dress, watching the ceremony with an expression that was equal parts fury and something else, something that looked almost like grief. During the reception, Victoria approached Marcus and Destiny with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Congratulations, Victoria said. You two make quite the couple. Destiny extended her hand politely. Thank you for coming. Victoria looked at Destiny's outstretched hand but didn't take it. Instead, she leaned in close. So close only Destiny could hear what she said next. He hasn't told you the truth about his father, Victoria whispered. About the money, about what really happened to Coleman Holdings. Then she stepped back, smiled her cold smile, and walked away. Destiny stood there, champagne glass in hand, heart hammering, the noise of the reception fatting into silence. She turned to find Marcus across the room, laughing with Kenji Tanaka, his best friend and CFO. He looked happy, truly happy. For the first time in years. He hasn't told you the truth about his father. What truth? What could Marcus Coleman, Jr. possibly be hiding about the collapse of his father's company? And why did the look on Victoria's face suggest that the answer would destroy everything? The reception ended at midnight. Marcus and Destiny checked into the presidential suite at the Magnolia Hotel in downtown Houston. The city lights glittered through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The bed was covered in rose petals. The air smelled like champagne and expensive perfume. Marcus fell asleep almost instantly, exhausted from the day, his breathing slow and steady, one arm draped loosely over Destiny's waist. But Destiny couldn't sleep. Victoria's words kept echoing in her mind like a curse. She slipped out of bed, wrapped herself in a white silk robe, and walked quietly into the living area of the suite. Marcus's leather briefcase sat on the glass coffee table. She hadn't been looking for anything. She had only been searching for a phone charger. But when her fingers brushed against a thick manila envelope tucked inside the front pocket, something in her chest tightened. A warning, a whisper. The kind of feeling that had kept her alive through 8 years of double shifts, empty refrigerators, and sleepless nights. She opened it. Inside was a single photograph and a legal document. The photograph was faded, the edges curled with age. It showed a man in a dark suit shaking hands with another man beside a black sedan. A silver briefcase sat open between them, stuffed with cash. Destiny's breath caught in her throat. She knew that face. She knew the sharp jawline, the thick eyebrows, the way his shoulders sat slightly uneven. It was her father, Harold Williams, the man who had walked out of her life when she was 9 years old. The man she had spent 15 years believing had abandoned her and her mother. But he wasn't alone in the photo. The man shaking his hand wore a tailored navy suit, a gold watch, and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Destiny didn't recognize him. But the license plate on the sedan behind them was clear enough to read, and the embossed logo on the briefcase made her blood run cold. Coleman Holdings. Her fingers moved to the legal document. It was a settlement agreement, dated 15 years ago, signed in black ink. The language was dense, but the numbers jumped off the page like gunshots. $2 million, embezzled from Coleman Holdings' corporate accounts, transferred to offshore holdings under the name Harold Williams. Settlement reached, non-disclosure enforced, all records sealed, Destiny's vision blurred, her chest tightened. She couldn't breathe. Coleman Holdings, that was Marcus's father's company, the company that had collapsed overnight, the company that had driven Marcus Coleman SR to take his own life 6 months later, the tragedy that had broken Marcus Coleman Jr. into the quiet, guarded, intensely private man she had just married 3 hours ago. Her father hadn't abandoned them. He had stolen. He had lied, he had destroyed a family, and he had left Destiny and her mother to pay the price. A soft sound escaped her lips, not a cry, not a scream, just the sound of a heart cracking open. She flipped the photograph over. On the back, in her father's familiar slanted handwriting, were 7 words that turned her entire world to ash. The fire wasn't an accident. They needed the property. Coleman had to go. The fire that had burned their Caldwell County home to the ground. The fire that had taken her mother's life. The fire that had left 16-year-old Destiny standing in the rain in her pajamas, holding her 12-year-old sister Grace, watching everything she loved turn to smoke. It wasn't faulty wiring. It wasn't bad luck. It was murder, and her father had known. Destiny's hands shook so violently the photograph slipped from her fingers and drifted to the marble floor. She pressed both hands over her mouth to keep from screaming. Tears burned her eyes, hot and fast, spilling over her cheeks and dripping onto the white silk of her robe. Behind her, in the darkened bedroom, Marcus Coleman Jr. slept, her husband, the man who had held her hands at the altar 3 hours ago and whispered, "I promise to never hide from you again." The man who had built a billion-dollar empire from the ashes of his father's ruin. The man who had no idea he had just married the daughter of the man who destroyed his family. Destiny looked at the legal document again. At the bottom, a single line had been typed in bold. Sign within 24 hours. Walk away with $5 million. Stay and face the consequences of the truth. Someone knew. Someone had left this for her, and whoever it was didn't want her married to Marcus Coleman Jr. If your jaw is on the floor right now, good. That means you're paying attention. Drop a fire emoji in the comments if you think Destiny should sign the paper and run, and share this video with someone who you know loves stories like this. Let's continue because everything is about to change and you do not want to miss it. The marble floor was cold beneath Destiny's bare feet. She sat on the edge of the king-sized bed in the presidential suite of the Magnolia Hotel, her white silk robe slipping off one shoulder, her hands trembling so badly she could barely hold the manila envelope. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, downtown Houston glittered like a field of broken glass. Traffic hummed on Main Street. The city moved on, completely unaware that a young woman's entire life had just collapsed in a luxury hotel room. Behind her, Marcus Coleman Jr. slept, His breathing was slow and steady. One arm was still draped across the empty space where she had been lying an hour ago. His face was peaceful. For the first time in years, the tension that usually lived in his jaw was gone. He looked like a man who had finally found safe harbor, and Destiny was holding a storm in her hands. She looked down at the legal document again. The bold letters at the bottom seemed to pulse against the paper. Sign within 24 hours. Walk away with $5 million. Stay and face the consequences of the truth. 24 hours. The clock had already started ticking. Destiny pressed her palms against her eyes and tried to breathe. Her father's handwriting on the back of the photograph burned in her mind like a brand. The fire wasn't an accident. They needed the property. Coleman had to go. 8 years. 8 years of believing her mother died because of old wiring and bad luck. 8 years of working double shifts, swallowing pride, and telling herself that survival was enough. 8 years of building a life on a foundation of ash. And now, on her wedding night, the ground had opened up beneath her. Her father hadn't abandoned them. He had stolen $2 million from Marcus's father's company. He had made a deal. And when the deal fell apart, someone had burned their home to the ground. Destiny looked at Marcus again. At the man who had knelt in a dimly lit bar and promised to never hide from her. At the man who had built an empire from the ruins of his father's tragedy. At the man who had no idea he had just married the daughter of the man who helped destroy his family. If she signed the paper, she could walk away. $5 million. Enough to send Grace through medical school. Enough to buy Pastor Harold a new church roof. Enough to disappear and never look back. But it would mean leaving Marcus. It would mean running from the truth. It would mean becoming exactly what her father had been. Destiny wiped her tears with the back of her hand. Her jaw tightened. Her spine straightened. She wasn't her father. She folded the photograph and the legal document carefully, slipped them back into the manila envelope, and tucked it deep inside her overnight bag. Then she walked back to the bed, slipped beneath the sheets, and lay beside her husband. She didn't sleep. She watched the Houston skyline slowly fade from black to gray to gold. She listened to Marcus breathe. She counted the hours. And when the sun finally rose over the city, Destiny Williams made her choice. She wasn't running. She was going to find out who really started that fire. If your heart is pounding right now, take a second and hit that like button. Drop a comment saying, "Destiny is choosing truth," because what she's about to uncover will shake Houston to its core. And if you're new here, subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss a single moment of this story. Marcus woke up smiling. He reached for Destiny, but she was already dressed, standing by the window with a cup of coffee in her hands. She wore a simple cream sweater and dark jeans, her natural black hair pulled into a low ponytail. She looked beautiful. She also looked like she hadn't slept at all. "Morning, Mrs. Coleman," Marcus said, his voice still rough with sleep. He sat up, rubbing his face. "You okay? You're quiet." Destiny turned. She forced a smile. It didn't quite reach her eyes. "Just thinking. Wedding days are loud. Mornings after are quiet. I'm adjusting." Marcus studied her. He knew that look. He had worn it himself for years. It was the look of someone carrying something heavy and trying not to let it show. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood up, walking toward her. He stopped just inches away, his hands gently resting on her shoulders. "Destiny, look at me." She met his eyes, dark, warm, honest. "If something's wrong," Marcus said softly, "you don't have to carry it alone. Not anymore. We're a team now, remember." Destiny's throat tightened. She wanted to tell him. She wanted to pull the envelope from her bag and lay it on the table and say, "My father stole from your family. My father's note says your father had to go. I think someone murdered my mother." But the words wouldn't come. Not yet. Not until she knew who had left that envelope. Not until she knew who was still pulling strings from the shadows. "I'm okay," Destiny lied, her voice steady. "I just need to run to 3rd Ward. Pastor Harold called. He needs help with the food pantry inventory. I'll be back by dinner." Marcus didn't look convinced, but he didn't push. He kissed her forehead instead. "Take my car. The driver will wait for you." And Destiny, "Yeah. I love you. Whatever it is, we'll handle it." Destiny nodded, grabbed her bag, and walked out the door before her courage broke. Grace Covenant Church sat on the corner of Elgin and Dowling in Houston's historic 3rd Ward. The brick building was old, the paint was peeling, but the stained glass windows still caught the morning light like fire. Destiny walked through the side door and down the narrow hallway to Pastor Harold Thompson's office. The room smelled like lemon polish, old books, and decades of prayers. Pastor Harold sat behind a worn wooden desk, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose, his gray hair neatly combed. He was 62 years old, built like a man who had carried his congregation on his back for 30 years, and his eyes still held the same quiet strength that had kept Destiny and Grace alive when they were teenagers. "Child," Pastor Harold said, looking up, "you're supposed to be on your honeymoon. Why are you standing in my doorway looking like you've seen a ghost?" Destiny closed the door behind her. She didn't sit. She couldn't. "Pastor," Destiny said, her voice trembling. "I need to ask you about my father." Pastor Harold's expression shifted. The warmth in his eyes cooled into something careful, something guarded. He slowly removed his glasses and set them on the desk. "Harold Williams," Pastor Harold said quietly. "I wondered when you'd come asking." "You knew him," Destiny said. "Before he left, before the fire, you knew what he was really doing." Pastor Harold sighed. He leaned back in his chair, his hands folding over his stomach. "I knew he was a desperate man. I knew he got mixed up with people who had more money than morals. And I knew that when things went wrong, he ran to protect you and Grace." "Protect us," Destiny's voice cracked. "He stole $2 million, Pastor, from Coleman Holdings, from Marcus's father's company. There's a settlement document, sealed records, and a note in his handwriting that says the fire wasn't an accident, that they needed the property, that Coleman had to go." Pastor Harold closed his eyes. For a long moment, he didn't speak. The only sound was the distant hum of traffic outside and the ticking of the old wall clock. When he finally opened his eyes, they were heavy with sorrow. "Your father didn't steal that money for himself, Destiny," Pastor Harold said. "He took it as a down payment, a bribe. Coleman Holdings wanted a tract of land in Caldwell County, land your mother inherited from her grandmother. They were planning a massive data corridor. Fiber lines, server farms, infrastructure that would cut straight through East Texas. Your mother's property sat dead center on the route." Destiny's breath caught. "Mama never mentioned land, because she didn't know its value," Pastor Harold continued. "To her, it was just woods and an old farmhouse, but to Coleman Holdings, it was worth tens of millions. They couldn't use eminent domain because the deed was private and protected. So they went through your father. They offered him $2 million to forge your mother's signature on a sale agreement. He took the money. He thought he could convince her. He thought he could give you and Grace a better life." "But she said no," Destiny whispered. "She said no," Pastor Harold confirmed. "Evelyn Williams was a proud woman. She told your father that land was family, not currency. She refused to sign. The deal collapsed. Coleman Holdings panicked. They had already promised investors the corridor would be built. They had already spent millions on permits and surveys. When your father tried to return the money, they told him it was too late. The board wanted results." Destiny's hands curled into fists. "Who ordered the fire?" Pastor Harold's jaw tightened. "I don't know for certain, but I know the name of the man who ran Coleman Holdings Acquisitions Division 15 years ago. Richard Vance. Cold, calculating, the kind of man who believed ends justified means. When your father realized what Vance was planning, he tried to get you girls out. He packed bags. He called me. He told me to watch over you if something happened. But he was too late. The fire started before he could get your mother to leave." Destiny felt tears burning her eyes again. "So he ran. He left us to save himself." "He left because Vance's men were looking for him," Pastor Harold said firmly. "If they found him, they would have used him to get to you and Grace. He disappeared to draw the heat away from you. He sent money anonymously for years. He watched from a distance. He died 3 years ago, Destiny, alone, in a small apartment in San Antonio. The police said it was a heart attack, but I believe the weight of what he couldn't fix finally stopped his heart." Destiny pressed her hands over her mouth. The room spun. Her father hadn't been a monster. He had been a trapped man. A man who made a terrible choice and spent the rest of his life trying to outrun the consequences. But that didn't change the truth. Someone had ordered that fire. Someone had killed her mother. And that someone was still out there. "Pastor," Destiny said, her voice shaking but steady. "Richard Vance, is he still alive?" Pastor Harold nodded slowly. "Yes, and he's still powerful. He sits on the board of Coleman Technologies. Marcus kept him on after he rebuilt the company. He doesn't know Vance's past. He only knows him as a senior advisor who helped stabilize the stock after his father's death." Destiny's blood ran cold. The man who destroyed her family was sitting in her husband's boardroom. And someone had just given her 24 hours to run before the truth came out. Destiny left the church with her mind racing. She needed proof. She needed names. She needed to know who had left that envelope in Marcus's briefcase. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Unknown number, she answered. "Hello," "Meet me at Blackwood Coffee on Westthamer," a woman's voice said. Calm, familiar. 10 minutes, come alone and bring the envelope. The line went dead. Destiny knew that voice. Victoria Cole. Blackwood Coffee was quiet, tucked between a vintage bookstore and a flower shop in Montrose. Destiny walked in, her bag slung over her shoulder, her eyes scanning the room. Victoria sat in the back corner, wearing a simple navy blouse and dark jeans, her blonde hair pulled into a low ponytail. No designer dresses, no cold smiles, no armor. She looked tired. She looked real. Destiny slid into the chair across from her. She didn't speak, she just waited. Victoria sighed. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup and looked down. "I left the envelope, Destiny." Destiny's chest tightened. "Why?" "Because I couldn't watch you walk into a trap blindfolded," Victoria said. "And because I owe Marcus the truth. I just didn't have the courage to give it to him myself." "You whispered at the reception," Destiny said. "You said he hadn't told me the truth about his father, about the money." "Marcus doesn't know the truth," Victoria said quietly. "He thinks his father embezzled the money. He thinks his father's guilt drove him to suicide. He built his entire life trying to outrun that shame. But he's wrong. His father didn't steal a dime." Destiny leaned forward. "Then who did?" "Richard Vance," Victoria said. "He was the CFO of Coleman Holdings. He orchestrated the embezzlement. He used your father as a fall guy. He forged the settlement documents. He made it look like Harold Williams took the money and Marcus Coleman SR covered it up. When the board started asking questions, Vance panicked. He needed the Caldwell County land deal to go through to cover the financial hole. When your mother refused to sell, Vance ordered the fire to clear the property and collect the insurance payout. He thought it would look like an accident. He didn't expect your mother to be inside." Destiny's hands trembled. "And Marcus's father?" "He found out," Victoria said. "He confronted Vance. Vance threatened to frame him for the embezzlement if he spoke. Marcus SR was a proud man. He couldn't bear the thought of his name being dragged through the mud, of his son inheriting a criminal legacy. So he took the fall. He signed the false confessions Vance drafted. He let the board believe he was guilty. And 6 months later, the weight of it broke him." Tears spilled down Destiny's cheeks. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Why did you leave Marcus 3 years ago?" Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "Because Vance came to me. He showed me photos. Fake photos of me with another man. He told me if I didn't leave Marcus, he would leak them to the press. He would destroy Marcus's reputation. He would tank the company. He said Marcus was getting too close to uncovering the old Coleman Holdings records. He needed me gone so Marcus would be distracted, broken, easy to control." She reached across the table and took Destiny's hand. Her grip was warm, shaking. "I left because I loved him," Victoria whispered. "I let him hate me because it was the only way to protect him. But when I saw him with you, when I saw him finally heal, I realized I couldn't let Vance win. I couldn't let him use your family's tragedy to keep controlling Marcus's life. So I stole the envelope from Vance's private safe. I planted it in Marcus's briefcase. I gave you 24 hours because I knew if you ran, Vance would think he'd won. But if you stayed, if you fought, we could finally bury him." Destiny stared at her. The woman she had thought was a jealous ex was actually a survivor. A woman who had sacrificed her own happiness to protect the man she loved. "Why trust me?" Destiny asked. "Because you're not running," Victoria said. "I've been watching you since the wedding. You found the envelope. You didn't sign it. You didn't flee. You went to your pastor. You're digging. That's why I'm giving you this." Victoria slid a small silver key across the table. "Safety deposit box," Victoria said. "First National Bank on Main Street, box 417. Your father rented it 15 years ago. He paid the fees anonymously until the day he died. Everything he couldn't say out loud is in there. Journals, recordings, copies of the real settlement documents. Vance doesn't know it exists. If he did, he would have burned it years ago." Destiny picked up the key. It felt heavy, cold, final. "What happens if I open it?" Destiny asked. "Then you'll have enough to destroy Vance," Victoria said. "But you'll also have to tell Marcus the truth, all of it, and I don't know if your marriage will survive that." Destiny closed her fingers around the key. "It has to, because I'm not letting a dead man's secrets ruin a living man's future." Victoria nodded. A small, sad smile touched her lips. "Then go, before Vance realizes the envelope is missing. And Destiny? Yeah. Tell Marcus I'm sorry for everything. If you're sitting there with your jaw on the floor right now, good. That means you're paying attention. Drop an emoji in the comments if you think Victoria just became the real hero of this story. and share this video with someone who needs to see what happens next. Because the truth is about to walk through a bank vault door, and nothing will ever be the same. First National Bank on Main Street was quiet in the late afternoon. Destiny showed the key and her ID to the vault manager, who led her down a narrow staircase into the cool, silent basement. The air smelled like metal and old paper. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The manager unlocked the gate, pointed to row 4, and left her alone. Box 417 sat at eye level. Destiny's hands shook as she slid the key into the lock. It turned with a soft click. She pulled the long metal drawer out and set it on the counter. Inside was a worn leather journal, a stack of manila folders, and a small digital voice recorder. Destiny opened the journal first. Her father's handwriting filled the pages. Dates, names, amounts, meetings with Richard Vance, descriptions of threats, pleas for forgiveness. And then near the end, a single entry that made her breath stop. October 12th. Vance ordered the burn. I tried to stop it. I called Evelyn. She wouldn't leave. She said the land was ours. She said she'd rather die than let thieves take it. I'm packing the girls' bags. I'm getting them out. If I don't make it, tell Destiny I loved her. Tell her I was weak. Tell her to be stronger than I was. Destiny pressed her hand over her mouth. Tears fell onto the open pages. Her father hadn't run to save himself. He had run to save them. He had failed to save her mother, but he had spent the rest of his life trying to make sure they survived. She set the journal down and picked up the voice recorder. Her thumb hovered over the play button. She pressed it. Static, then a voice, rough, tired, broken. Destiny, if you're hearing this, I'm gone. And you found the truth. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I took Vance's money because I was scared. Because I wanted you and Grace to have more than I could give you. But I was a fool. Vance didn't want the land. He wanted a cover. The embezzlement was his. The fire was his. Your mother's death is on his hands. I have copies of everything. Bank transfers, email chains, board meeting recordings. It's all in the folders. Give it to Marcus Coleman, Jr., not the board, not the police. Marcus, he's clean. He doesn't know what Vance did to his father. He doesn't know his father took the fall to protect him. Tell him the truth. Tell him I'm sorry. And tell him his father was a good man, a proud man. He didn't deserve what Vance did to him. I love you, baby girl. I always did. Be brave. Be better than me. The recording ended. Destiny sat in the cold vault, tears streaming down her face, her chest heaving with sobs she couldn't hold back. Her father hadn't been a villain. He had been a broken man who made a terrible choice and spent his life trying to fix it. And Richard Vance had been the monster all along. Destiny wiped her face. She gathered the journal, the folders, and the recorder. She slipped them into her bag. She locked the box. She walked out of the vault with her head high and her heart on fire. She was going to tell Marcus. She was going to give him the truth. And together, they were going to burn Richard Vance's empire to the ground. Across downtown Houston, on the 42nd floor of Coleman Technologies Tower, Marcus Coleman, Jr., sat alone in his office. The sun was setting. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple. The city below was winding down, but Marcus couldn't rest. He hadn't been able to focus all day. Destiny's quietness, the way she had looked at him that morning, the way she had left without really saying goodbye. Something was wrong. And Marcus Coleman, Jr., had spent his life learning that when something felt wrong, it usually was. He opened his laptop. He pulled up the old Coleman Holdings archives, files he hadn't touched in years, files he had avoided because they reminded him of his father's shame. But today, he didn't look away. He searched for Richard Vance's name, board meeting minutes, acquisition reports, financial audits. And then he found it. A redacted email chain from 15 years ago. Subject line, Caldwell Property Acquisition Contingency Measures. Marcus clicked it open. Most of the text was blacked out, but one line remained visible. If the Williams signature is not secured by Friday, proceed with alternative clearance. Insurance will cover the loss. Coleman SR will take the fall if questioned. He's already compromised. Marcus's blood ran cold. Alternative clearance. Insurance will cover the loss. Coleman SR will take the fall. His father hadn't embezzled the money. He had been framed, and Richard Vance had orchestrated it all. Marcus stood up so fast his chair rolled backward and hit the wall. His hands trembled. His chest tightened. 15 years of guilt. 15 years of believing his father was a thief. 15 years of building a company to outrun a shame that wasn't his. And the man who had done it was sitting on his board. Marcus grabbed his phone. He dialed Kenji Tanaka. Kenji, Marcus said, his voice shaking. I need you to pull every record we have on Richard Vance, every email, every transaction, every board vote from the old Coleman Holdings days. I don't care if it's sealed, I don't care if it's buried, I want it all. Marcus, Kenji said, his voice tight. What's going on? My father didn't steal that money, Marcus said. Vance did, and I think he killed someone to cover it up. Silence on the other end. Then Kenji whispered, Marcus. You need to come home now. Why? Because I just checked the security logs at the Magnolia Hotel, Kenji said. Destiny's bag was scanned at the entrance. There's a manila envelope inside, and Marcus. The hotel staff logged it as legal documents, Coleman Holdings settlement. Marcus's heart stopped. Destiny had the envelope. Destiny knew, and she hadn't told him. Marcus grabbed his keys and ran out of the office. Destiny unlocked the door to the presidential suite just after 7. The room was dark. The city lights glowed through the windows. She set her bag on the coffee table, her hands still shaking from the vault, her mind racing with everything she had learned. She was going to tell him, tonight, no more secrets, no more running. Destiny. The voice came from the living area. Low, shaking, broken, Destiny froze. Marcus stood near the glass coffee table. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket. His tie was loose. His sleeves were rolled up, and in his hands he held the manila envelope. It was open. The photograph lay on the table. The legal document was unfolded, and Marcus was staring at the back of the photograph, at her father's handwriting, at the 7 words that had shattered her world. The fire wasn't an accident. They needed the property. Coleman had to go. Marcus looked up. His eyes were red. His jaw was clenched. His hands were trembling so badly the paper shook in his grip. Destiny, Marcus whispered, his voice cracking. Who is Harold Williams to you? The heir left the room. The clock struck 8. 24 hours weren't up, but the truth had already walked through the door. The air in the presidential suite felt thick enough to choke on. Marcus Coleman, Jr., stood beside the glass coffee table, the manila envelope trembling in his hands. His dark eyes were locked on the faded photograph. On the back, 7 words in slanted handwriting burned like a brand. The fire wasn't an accident. They needed the property. Coleman had to go. He looked up. His voice cracked when he spoke. Destiny, who is Harold Williams to you? Destiny stood in the doorway, her overnight bag still slung over her shoulder, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The 24-hour deadline didn't matter anymore. The clock had stopped. The truth had already walked through the door. She didn't run, she didn't lie, she didn't hide. She stepped forward, closed the door behind her, and met his eyes. He's my father, Destiny said. Her voice was quiet, steady, shattered. Marcus's breath left him in a rush. The photograph slipped from his fingers and fluttered to the marble floor. He took a step back, his hands rising to his temples, his eyes wide with a pain so raw it made Destiny's chest ache. Your father, Marcus whispered. The man who stole $2 million from my family. The man whose signature is on the settlement that destroyed my father's name. The man who... His voice broke. He couldn't finish the sentence. Destiny dropped her bag. She walked to him, slow and deliberate, her hands open at her sides. Marcus, look at me. He didn't. He stared at the floor, his jaw clenched so tight a muscle jumped in his cheek. 15 years of guilt. 15 years of believing his father was a thief. 15 years of building an empire to outrun a shame that wasn't his. And now, standing in front of him, was the daughter of the man who had helped bury his family. I didn't know, Destiny said, her voice trembling but clear. I swear to you, Marcus, I didn't know until last night. I found the envelope in your briefcase. I saw the photo, I read the note, and I spent today digging. I went to Pastor Harold. I went to a safety deposit box my father rented 15 years ago. I listened to his voice. I read his journals, and I need you to hear me. Marcus finally looked up. His eyes were red, wet, guarded, but he didn't pull away. Talk, he said, one word, heavy, final. Destiny reached into her bag. She pulled out the worn leather journal, the stack of manila folders, and the small digital voice recorder. She set them on the coffee table beside the legal document. Then she pressed play on the recorder. Static filled the quiet room. Then a voice, rough, tired, broken. Destiny, if you're hearing this, I'm gone. And you found the truth. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I took Vance's money because I was scared. Because I wanted you and Grace to have more than I could give you. But I was a fool. Vance didn't want the land. He wanted a cover. The embezzlement was his. The fire was his. Your mother's death is on his hands. I have copies of everything. Bank transfers, email chains, board meeting recordings. It's all in the folders. Give it to Marcus Coleman, Jr. Not the board, not the police. Marcus. He's clean. He doesn't know what Vance did to his father. He doesn't know his father took the fall to protect him. Tell him the truth. Tell him I'm sorry. And tell him his father was a good man, a proud man. He didn't deserve what Vance did to him. I love you, baby girl. I always did. Be brave. Be better than me. The recording ended. The silence that followed was heavier than the storm outside. Marcus stood frozen. His hands trembled. His chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths. Then, slowly, he sank to his knees beside the coffee table. He pressed both hands over his face. And he broke. Not in anger, not in betrayal. In grief. 15 years of carrying a dead man's shame. 15 years of believing his father chose greed over family. 15 years of waking up with a weight on his chest that he thought he deserved. And it was all a lie. Destiny knelt beside him. She didn't touch him at first. She just stayed close. Present. Steady. Marcus, she whispered. Your father didn't steal that money. Richard Vance did. Vance forged the settlement. Vance framed your father. Vance ordered the fire to clear my mother's land and cover the financial hole. My father took the bribe because he was desperate, but when he realized what Vance was planning, he tried to stop it. He tried to get us out. He failed to save my mother, but he spent the rest of his life gathering proof. He left it for me, and I'm giving it to you. Marcus lowered his hands. His face was streaked with tears. His eyes met hers. And in them, Destiny didn't see blame. She didn't see rejection. She saw a man finally being handed back his father's name. He was innocent, Marcus whispered. His voice cracked. My father was innocent. Yes, Destiny said. And so are you. Marcus let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. He reached for her. His hands found her face, his thumbs brushing away her tears, his forehead resting against hers. They knelt on the marble floor of a luxury hotel suite, surrounded by documents and recordings and 15 years of lies, and they held on to each other like they were the only solid things left in the world. I thought you were going to leave, Marcus murmured. When I saw the envelope, when I read the note, I thought you were going to sign it and run. I thought about it, Destiny admitted. For about 10 seconds, then I remembered who I am and I remembered who you are. We don't run from the truth, Marcus. We face it together. Marcus pulled back just enough to look at her. His eyes were clear now, focused, determined. Vance is still on my board. He's still drawing a salary. He's still sitting in the building my father built. Then we remove him, Destiny said. Not with secrets, not with threats, with truth, with evidence, with everything my father left behind. Marcus nodded. He stood, pulling her up with him. He picked up the folders. He picked up the journal. He picked up the recorder. And for the first time in 15 years, Marcus Coleman, Jr., didn't feel like he was carrying a ghost. He felt like he was finally fighting for his family. If your heart is full right now, take a second and hit that like button. Drop a comment saying, "Truth sets you free," because what happens next will show you what real love looks like when it's tested by fire. And if you're new here, subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss the final moments of this story. The next morning, the sky over Houston was clear and bright. The kind of day that felt like a fresh start. Inside Coleman Technologies Tower, the 42nd floor boardroom was quiet. Polished mahogany table, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Buffalo Bayou. The air smelled like coffee and quiet power. Richard Vance sat at the head of the table, 68 years old. Silver hair, tailored navy suit, a smile that had convinced investors, silenced auditors, and buried secrets for 3 decades. He sipped his coffee, completely unaware that the ground beneath him was about to crack open. The double doors opened. Marcus walked in first, dark suit, tie straight, shoulders back. He didn't look like a man carrying shame anymore. He looked like a man who had finally remembered his name. Destiny walked beside him, cream blouse, dark slacks. Her natural black hair pulled into a sleek ponytail. Her eyes were calm, her posture was steady. She carried a thick leather portfolio. Behind them came Kenji Tanaka holding a tablet and a stack of printed financial records. And behind him, stepping through the doorway with quiet grace, was Victoria Cole. Vance's smile faltered. He set his coffee down slowly. Marcus, this is a closed board meeting and you've brought guests. This isn't a board meeting, Richard, Marcus said. His voice was low. Even, cold. This isn't accounting. Vance's eyes flicked to Destiny, then to Victoria, then to the portfolio in Destiny's hands. A muscle tightened in his jaw. I don't know what you think you're doing, but you're overstepping. No, Destiny said. She stepped forward and placed the portfolio on the table. She opened it. Inside were bank statements, email chains, board meeting transcripts, and a copy of the original settlement agreement with Vance's forged signatures highlighted in yellow. Finally finishing what you started 15 years ago. Vance's face went pale. He stood up slowly. Those documents are sealed. They're legally protected. You have no right. I have every right, Marcus cut in. Because you didn't just steal from a company, Richard. You stole from my father. You framed him. You drove him to his grave. And when my wife's mother refused to sell her land to cover your embezzlement, you ordered a fire that killed an innocent woman. The room went dead silent. Vance's hands trembled. He tried to laugh, but it came out thin and brittle. That's absurd. Harold Williams took the money. The fire was faulty wiring. Your father confessed. The records are clear. The records are lies, Kenji said, stepping forward. He tapped his tablet. A projection screen lowered from the ceiling. Financial trails lit up the wall, offshore accounts, shell companies, email chains with Vance's corporate signature. I spent all night cross-referencing the old Coleman Holdings servers with the documents Destiny provided. The money never touched Harold Williams' personal accounts. It went through 3 shell corporations you controlled. The settlement was drafted on your private server. And the board vote that forced Marcus SR to take the fall, you manipulated the quorum. You forged 2 proxy signatures. Vance's breathing grew shallow. He looked at the door. It was closed. Kenji had locked it from the outside. You can't prove intent, Vance snapped, his voice rising. You can't prove I ordered anything. It's circumstantial. It's 15 years old. No court will touch it. Maybe not, Destiny said quietly. She reached into her bag and pulled out the digital voice recorder. She set it on the table, pressed play. A new recording filled the room, not her father's voice this time. Richard Vance's voice, younger, sharper, cold. If the Williams signature isn't secured by Friday, proceed with alternative clearance. Burn the shed. Make it look like an electrical fault. Insurance will cover the loss. Coleman SR is already compromised. He'll take the fall if questioned. I've drafted the confession. He'll sign it to protect the boy, clean it up, leave no traces. The recording ended. Vance's face went completely white. He staggered back, his hands gripping the edge of the table. That's fabricated. That's illegal. You can't use that. It's a boardroom recording from your own private line, Victoria said, stepping forward. Her voice was steady. Her eyes were clear. You kept backups of everything, Richard. You thought they made you untouchable. I found them in your safe 3 years ago. That's why you blackmailed me into leaving Marcus. That's why you threatened my family. You knew if Marcus ever looked closely at the old files, he'd find your voice, so you broke him instead. Vance's knees buckled. He sank into his chair. The arrogance was gone. The power was gone. All that was left was a tired, terrified man who had spent 15 years running from his own shadow. Marcus walked to the head of the table. He didn't yell. He didn't gloat. He just looked down at the man who had destroyed 2 families and said quietly, "You're done." Vance looked up. His eyes were wet. Marcus, I did it for the company. I did it to save what your father built. No, Marcus said. You did it to save yourself, and you used my father's name as a shield. You used my wife's mother as collateral. You used my grief as a weapon. That ends today. Marcus turned to Kenji. Call security, call the district attorney, hand over everything, every file, every recording. Every dollar he stole gets returned to the families he hurt, starting with the Williams estate. Kenji nodded. Pulled out his phone and stepped into the hallway. Vance didn't fight. He didn't run. He just sat there staring at the table as 2 security officers entered the room and gently but firmly escorted him out. The doors closed behind them. The boardroom was quiet again. Victoria let out a long, shaky breath. She looked at Marcus. I'm sorry for everything, for leaving, for lying, for letting you believe you were alone. Marcus stepped toward her. He didn't hug her. He didn't owe her that. But he nodded. You came back when it mattered. That counts. Thank you, Victoria. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. She nodded back, turned, and walked out of the room, her shoulders lighter than they had been in 3 years. Destiny stood beside Marcus. She took his hand. His fingers laced through hers, warm, steady, real. It's over, Destiny whispered. Marcus looked at her, then at the Houston skyline beyond the windows, then back at her. No, he said softly. It's finally beginning. Drop your best emoji in the comments if you believe justice doesn't always come with a gavel, but sometimes with the courage to speak the truth. Share this with someone who needs to remember that no secret stays buried forever. 3 days later, the sky was soft and gray over Houston Memorial Park. Marcus stood in front of a simple granite headstone. The engraving read, Marcus Coleman SR, beloved father, honorable man. For 15 years, Marcus had visited this grave with shame in his chest. He had left flowers with a heavy heart. He had whispered apologies to a man he thought had chosen greed over family. Today, he knelt in the damp grass and pressed his hand against the cold stone. "I'm sorry I believed them, Dad," Marcus whispered. His voice cracked. "I'm sorry I let them stain your name. I'm sorry I didn't fight harder for the truth. But I know now. I know you took the fall to protect me. I know you were innocent. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure the world knows it too." A gentle hand rested on his shoulder. Destiny knelt beside him. She placed a single white rose at the base of the headstone. Then she placed another beside it. A small brass plaque rested between them. "Evelyn Williams, beloved mother, brave woman." "They're together now," Destiny said softly. "Not in death, in truth. Your father's name is clean. My mother's memory is honored. And the man who hurt them both will never hurt anyone again." Marcus turned to her. He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her neck, breathing in the scent of rain and peace and home. They stayed like that for a long time. Two people who had been born from ash, kneeling in the grass, finally allowed to heal. "I love you," Marcus murmured against her skin. "Not despite the truth, because of it." Destiny closed her eyes. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but they weren't heavy anymore. They were light. They were free. "I love you too, and I'm not going anywhere." 2 months later, Rice University's football stadium was packed. Grace Williams walked across the stage in a navy cap and gown, her master's degree in biomedical engineering held tightly in her hands. The crowd cheered. Cameras flashed. And in the front row, Destiny stood on her seat, screaming until her voice gave out, tears streaming down her face, her hands clapping so hard they stung. Marcus sat beside her, laughing, his arm around her waist, his eyes shining with pride. Pastor Harold dabbed his eyes with a handkerchief. Kenji actually smiled. And Victoria, sitting 2 rows back, clapped quietly, a peaceful expression on her face. When Grace reached the bottom of the steps, she ran straight to Destiny. They collided in a hug that lifted them both off the ground. "We did it, Dee," Grace whispered, crying and laughing at the same time. "We actually did it." Destiny pulled back, cupping her sister's face. "You did it, baby girl, every late night, every exam. Every sacrifice. You earned this. Mama is so proud of you. I'm so proud of you." Grace looked past Destiny at Marcus. She stepped forward and hugged him too. Tight, fierce. "Thank you," she whispered, "for loving her, for staying, for being the family we didn't know we needed." Marcus hugged her back. "Thank you for trusting me with her." Pastor Harold stepped forward, his hands raised in blessing. "The Lord has brought you through the fire," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And he has not let you burn. He has refined you. He has restored you. And he has given you a future." Destiny looked at Marcus, at Grace, at the people who had become her family. And for the first time in 8 years, she didn't feel like she was surviving. She felt like she was living. 1 year later, the rain was falling again, not the angry kind, the gentle kind. The kind that made you roll down your car windows and breathe deep. Inside the copper lantern on West Gray Street, the bar was warm and glowing. String lights hung from the ceiling. The jukebox played something slow and soulful. The air smelled like bourbon, fried catfish, and home. Destiny stood behind the counter, wiping down glasses, her dark skin glowing under the amber lights, her natural hair loose around her shoulders, a simple gold wedding band shining on her finger. She wasn't working because she had to. She was working because she chose to. Because this bar had saved her. Because this bar had brought him to her. Marcus sat on a stool beside her, wearing a faded gray t-shirt and jeans, laughing at something Marcus Thompson had just said. He didn't look like a billionaire CEO. He looked like a man who had finally learned how to breathe. The door opened. Grace walked in, wearing a white lab coat over her clothes, her Rice University ID badge clipped to her chest, her smile bright enough to light the room. Kenji followed, holding a stack of foundation paperwork. Victoria walked in behind them, carrying a tray of clean glasses, her blonde hair tied back, her expression peaceful. Pastor Harold took his usual corner booth, nodding to everyone like a proud father. It wasn't a billionaire's gala. There were no flashing cameras, no corporate titles, no walls, just family. Destiny poured 2 glasses of whiskey. She slid one to Marcus. She kept the other, she raised it. "To the truth," Destiny said. Marcus raised his glass. His eyes met hers, warm, steady, full. "To the truth, and to the woman who taught me it's worth fighting for." They clinked glasses. The sound rang through the quiet bar like a bell. Marcus stood, walked around the counter, and wrapped his arms around her waist from behind. He rested his chin on her shoulder, his eyes closing, his breathing slow and even. Destiny leaned back into him, her hands resting over his, her heart beating in time with his. Outside, the rain fell softly against the windows. Inside, the light stayed on. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful romance. Share it with someone who needs to remember that love isn't about perfect pasts. It's about brave futures. This story reminds us that sometimes the people we love carry secrets they think will protect us. Sometimes the past feels like a fire we can never escape. But truth doesn't destroy love. It refines it. It burns away the lies, the fear, the shame, and leaves only what's real. Destiny Williams thought she had to carry the world alone. Marcus Coleman, Jr., thought he had to outrun his father's ghost. Together, they learned the most important lesson of all. You don't heal by hiding in the ashes. You heal by standing in the light, hand in hand, and choosing each other anyway. Your past does not define you. Your courage does, your truth does, your love does. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the story, and I will see you in the next story. Remember, no matter what fire you've walked through, you are still standing. And that means you're ready for what comes next.